The white-haired king's hand closed around Lord Casimir's throat mid-sentence, lifting him from his chair with such controlled fury that the crystal goblets barely trembled. Brielle Nolan froze with her own glass halfway to her lips, watching as Tiberius Draconis carried the sputtering lord across the long table's polished length like a mother cat relocating an errant kitten. Except cats were gentler, and their prey usually stopped squeaking. "Common little cellar," the king said softly, each word edged in ice. "Common little hands." He reached the carved double doors, peasant with a corkscrew. The doors flew open at his approach, ancient wood groaning. "Tell me, Casimir, what does that make you for accepting her invitation to drink here tonight?" He threw the lord into the entrance hall. The sound of expensive tailoring meeting marble echoed through sudden, shocked silence. "Should you find your way back to your own estates," Tiberius continued, still in that terrible, quiet voice, "have your steward inform the conclave that House Voltaire no longer holds warrant to attend the annual gathering. The vote will be a formality." The doors closed. 5 heartbeats passed before anyone dared breathe. Tiberius turned back to the table, where 4 other house lords sat frozen in various states of horror and poorly concealed satisfaction. His pale gaze swept across them before landing on Brielle. She set down her glass very carefully. "Miss Nolan," he said, and his voice had shifted entirely, all warmth and old-world courtesy. "I apologize for the disruption to your presentation. The 2024 reserve is exceptional. Please, continue." Brielle had been blending blood wines for 8 years, ever since her father's hands grew too unsteady and her mother's nose dulled with age. She had presented to merchant houses, to ancient elders, to the notorious Duchess of Prague who'd reduced 3 sommeliers to tears before accepting their credentials. She had never lost her composure during a tasting. She lost it now, not visibly, but inside, where her pulse hammered against her ribs, where her mind replayed the casual violence and swifter grace of a king defending her honor without being asked. "Your Majesty is too kind," she managed, standing. Protocol said remain seated unless addressing the assembly, but protocol had just been thrown bodily into the entrance hall, and she was improvising. "Though I confess Lord Voltaire's critique raises an interesting point about terroir and perception." A slight tilt of that elegant white head. Tiberius Draconis was perhaps 6 feet tall, slender in the way of old steel, dressed in charcoal silk that made his porcelain skin luminous. His hair fell past his shoulders, straight and fine as spider silk. His eyes were dark amber, ancient and patient, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget the other 4 lords entirely. "Does it?" he said, not quite a question. "The reserve vintage comes from the North March territory, 3rd-generation donors whose bloodlines carry high iron and specific mineral notes from the regional water table. The oak barrels are French, yes, but the treatment process is entirely our own innovation. Lord Voltaire called it adequate, which suggests either his palate cannot distinguish complexity or—" she paused. "He never actually tasted it." The lord to her left, Lady Severine of House Moreau, made a sound suspiciously like a strangled laugh. Tiberius moved to his seat at the head of the table, gestures smooth as water. "You accuse him of theater. I accuse the vintage of being wasted on him, Your Majesty. There's a difference." "Indeed." He lifted his own untouched glass, studied the garnet liquid in the candlelight. For a long moment, he simply held it, and Brielle felt the weight of what she'd missed in her research. The king never drank at these gatherings. She'd assumed it was ceremonial distance, the way royalty often abstained to maintain clarity. But the way his fingers curved around the stem, the minute tension in his shoulders, spoke of something else entirely. He set the glass down without tasting. "The conclave will vote on the royal warrant in 3 days," he said, addressing the table at large. "House Nolan is among the candidates for primary supplier to the court. Tonight's presentation will weigh heavily in that decision." His attention shifted back to her. "Tell me about your donor protocols." This she could do. This was solid ground, facts and ethics, and the careful architecture of consent that separated her family's work from the black market operations still poisoning the blood trade's reputation. Every donor is registered through the Accord's central database, medical screening every quarter, legal consent renewed annually. We pay 70% above the Accord minimum. No coercion, no debt bondage, no desperation draws. Our waiting list is 43 people long because our donors talk. She met his eyes. They're not commodity sources, Your Majesty. They're partners in the process. Some of them have been with us for a decade. They attend the harvest festivals. They help us refine flavor profiles. The 2024 reserve exists because one of our longest donors suggested trying a controlled vitamin regimen, and she was right. Their names appear on your bottles. On the casks, yes. Not public-facing, but anyone touring the cellars can see exactly whose contribution they're tasting. Transparency builds trust. Lady Severine leaned forward. Your family's operation is quite small, Miss Nolan. 40 donors? Perhaps 50? How would you scale to meet court demand without compromising these pretty ethics? The words were polite. The tone suggested Brielle was a child playing at business. We wouldn't scale alone, Brielle said evenly. The warrant would allow us to establish a cooperative model, bringing in 3 other small houses whose protocols match ours. Shared resources, maintained standards, distributed supply chain. None of us could meet the volume individually. Together, we exceed it. Assuming the other houses agree to join, they've already signed provisional contracts, pending warrant approval. Lord Iskander of House Demetrios, an Egyptian elder who'd been silent until now, stirred. You came prepared. I came realistic, my lord. We're a small operation, but small doesn't mean inadequate. She let that word hang for just a moment. It means attentive. It means every bottle receives personal oversight. It means when something goes wrong, we know immediately because we're in the cellars, not in boardrooms 3 states away. Tiberius was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not displeasure. Something more complicated, layered with old pain and newer interest. The conclave meets in 3 days, he repeated. There will be additional questions. You'll attend? Of course, Your Majesty. Good. He rose, and the table rose with him, Brielle a half-beat behind. Lords and ladies, the evening concludes. Miss Nolan, a moment of your time before you depart. Her stomach dropped even as she nodded. The other lords filed out, Lady Severine throwing her an unreadable look, Lord Iskander inclining his head with what might have been respect. Then it was just her and the king in a hall built for 50, candles burning low in their sconces, the ghost of Lord Voltaire's humiliation still hanging in the air. Tiberius gestured to the chair beside his own. Please, I promise not to throw you anywhere. The dry humor surprised her into a genuine smile. She sat, acutely aware of how close he was now, how the candlelight caught silver threads in his white hair, how his hands rested on the table with the stillness of someone who'd learned perfect control over centuries. You defended me, she said quietly. I didn't ask you to. No, you would have handled Casimir yourself, probably with that same surgical precision you just demonstrated with Severine. He turned slightly toward her. But I am tired of men like him attending my halls, drinking my hospitality, and treating honest work as beneath them because it involves human collaboration. Voltaire's not the only one who thinks that way. No, but he was the one fool enough to say it where I could hear. His jaw tightened. The blood trade spent 200 years as exploitation and terror. My father's generation bled humans dry and called it natural order. The Accord changed that, codified ethics, made consent and compensation law. And still there are lords who act as though we're owed blood and deference simply for existing. Brielle studied him, this ancient king who just outlined progressive politics with the weariness of someone who'd fought that battle personally. You helped write the Accord. I drafted the consent provisions, yes, over the objections of half the conclave, who insisted voluntary donation would never provide adequate supply. A faint, satisfied expression crossed his face. They were wrong. The registered donor pool has tripled in a decade. Turns out humans will give freely when you ask with respect and pay them fairly. Revolutionary concept. She laughed despite herself. Imagine. Your family understood that early. My grandfather understood it. He was a medic in the Second War, saw what desperation and exploitation did to people. When he came back and discovered the underground blood trade in our region, he thought there had to be a better way. Started with 10 donors, all friends, all compensated. Built from there. And now you're here, presenting to the conclave for the royal warrant. Tiberius tilted his head. Are you afraid? The question was too direct, too personal for a king and a supplicant. Brielle should have deflected, she said. Terrified. Why? Because if we don't get the warrant, 3 other families go under with us. Because the cooperative model only works if we're the anchor, and we only anchor if you trust us. Because. She stopped. Because? Because Lord Voltaire wasn't entirely wrong. We are small. We are common, in the sense that we don't come from old vampire money or established blood dynasties. My grandfather was a human medic who married a woman whose family ran a vineyard, and they combined their skills into something new. We're not elegant. We're not pedigreed. We're just very, very good at what we do. Tiberius was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. 412 years ago, my brother died from poisoned blood. The cupbearer who served him had been with our household for a century, trusted implicitly, above suspicion. The poison was rare, detectable only to someone who knew to look for it. My brother drank, collapsed, and burned from the inside out. Silver compounds, blessed silver, suspended in solution. Brielle's breath caught. She knew this story. Everyone in the trade knew some version of it, the cautionary tale that had sparked decades of paranoia and protocol. I'm sorry, she said inadequately. I killed the cupbearer myself. Then I killed the rival lord who'd bribed him, and the alchemist who'd formulated the compound, and the merchant who'd supplied the silver. I pulled their household registrations, seized their estates, and delivered their heads to the conclave in a box marked treachery. He said it without inflection, historical fact. And then I swore I would never drink blood I did not source and pour myself again. Oh, that was why he hadn't tasted her reserve, why his glass sat untouched at every gathering, why the greatest honor a vintner could receive, a king's public approval of their work, was something he physically could not give. For 400 years, Brielle said slowly, you haven't let anyone serve you. No. She struggled for words. That's incredibly lonely. His expression flickered, something raw and quickly shuddered. It's safe. Safe and lonely aren't mutually exclusive. No, they're not. He turned his glass in idle circles, the reserve catching light like liquid rubies. The conclave expects me to choose a warrant holder who can supply volume, yes, but also one I can trust with the court's safety. I cannot taste treachery in a bottle the way I once could, Miss Nolan. I can only rely on reputation, protocol, and the recommendations of others who do still taste. You want to trust again? Brielle said softly. But you don't know how. I know how. I've simply forgotten why I should. He met her eyes. Until tonight, perhaps. The moment stretched, fragile as spun sugar. Somewhere in the mansion a clock chimed midnight. Brielle became aware that she was alone with a king in an empty hall, that this conversation had veered wildly from protocol, that the way he was looking at her suggested she wasn't the only one caught off balance. The conclave meets in 3 days, she managed. I should prepare. Yes. But he didn't move, and neither did she. The meetings are held in the lower levels, where the old quarry was. The complex is extensive, easy to get lost. Are you offering to show me the way, Your Majesty? I'm offering to ensure you arrive safely. The warrant competition breeds resentment. Casimir is not the only lord who might take issue with your success. Is that likely? My success? His smile was small and devastating. Miss Nolan, you just held your ground against Severine, educated the table on donor ethics, and called out Casimir's performance for the fraud it was, all without losing your composure once. He stood, offered his hand. I would say success is not only likely but inevitable. The question is whether you'll accept a king's escort through the dangerous parts. She took his hand, felt cool fingers close around hers with surprising gentleness. I suspect the king is the most dangerous part. Perceptive and honest. No wonder your donors trust you. They walked to the entrance hall together, where her coat waited and the night beyond pressed against tall windows. Tiberius helped her into the coat with old-fashioned courtesy that should have felt archaic and instead felt impossibly intimate. 3 days, he said. The first session begins at sunset. Don't be late. I'm never late, Your Majesty. Tiberius. When we're alone, call me Tiberius. Her heart did something complicated. That's not appropriate protocol. I don't recall caring. He opened the door for her, letting in cool autumn air that smelled of rain and quarry water. Safe journey, Brielle Nolan. I look forward to your presentation. She left before she could say something stupid, before the way he spoke her name could undo the last of her composure. Her car waited in the circular drive, and she drove too fast down the winding road, back toward the city and the small cellar house where her family waited for news. Her phone buzzed before she'd gone 2 miles. Unknown number. She pulled over to check. The message was short. Lord Voltaire's complaint has been officially filed with the conclave. He claims you staged tonight's incident to gain sympathy and discredit competition. The vote may be delayed pending investigation. Thought you should know. A friend. Brielle stared at the screen, watching the message vanish after 15 seconds. Self-deleting security protocol. Then she called her father. He answered on the first ring. How did it go? We have a problem, Brielle said, and started the car again. The cellars smelled like oak and thyme, and the particular metallic sweetness of blood undergoing its slow fermentation. Brielle descended the worn stairs into her family's underground workspace, where her father Garrett waited with her mother Iris and her younger brother Colin, all of them wearing matching expressions of worry. Voltaire filed a complaint, she said without preamble. He's claiming I orchestrated his insult to make him look bad and gain the king's favor. Garrett swore creatively in 3 languages. Iris, more practical, moved to the locked cabinet where they kept records. We have witnesses. The entire table heard what he said. Witnesses who are also our competition for the warrant. Severine won't back me. Demetrios might, but he's neutral by policy. The others? Brielle shook her head. They'll say whatever serves their interests. Colin, who at 23 handled their digital security and donor database management, pulled out his tablet. What about recordings? The mansion has to have security feeds. Controlled by the conclave, which means Voltaire's allies can argue chain of custody, editing, bias. Brielle paced between the barrel rows. He's not trying to win. He's trying to create enough doubt that the vote gets tabled indefinitely, which gives him time to sabotage us some other way. Garrett's expression was grim. He looked older tonight, the silver in his dark hair catching the cellar's dim lighting. We knew the warrant competition would be vicious. We didn't expect it to get personal this fast. It got personal the moment Tiberius threw him out. Brielle stopped pacing. That's what this is really about. Voltaire's humiliated, and he's hitting back the only way he can. Iris closed the record cabinet, turned to face them all. So we prove we can't be rattled. We prepare for the conclave meeting like nothing's changed. We present our supply models, our cooperative agreements, our donor testimonials. We show them we're unshakable. And hope that's enough, Colin added quietly. Brielle looked at her family, these people who'd built something good and ethical in an industry still crawling out of its own dark history. They'd risked everything on her ability to navigate vampire politics, to win over ancient lords and a traumatized king. She couldn't let them down. It'll be enough, she said, with more confidence than she felt. It has to be. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of preparation. Brielle reviewed supply projections until the numbers swam, rehearsed presentations until her voice went hoarse, and fielded increasingly anxious calls from the 3 families who'd signed on to the cooperative model. Everyone wanted reassurance she couldn't quite give. The night before the conclave meeting, she couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, she gave up, dressed, and drove back to the cellars. Sometimes the only thing that helped was work, the physical ritual of checking casks, monitoring temperatures, adjusting fermentation timers. She was deep in the reserve section, noting temperature fluctuations in her tablet when she realized she wasn't alone. Your security is inadequate, Tiberius said from the stairs. Brielle bit back a yelp, spun around. The king stood 3 steps from the bottom, dressed in dark wool and looking far too comfortable in her cellar. "How did you even get in?" "The door was unlocked." "No, it wasn't. I locked it myself." "Then your locks are inadequate too." He descended the remaining steps. "You shouldn't be here alone at night with a complaint pending and enemies circling." "I'm fine. This is my territory." "This is a basement with 1 exit and no witnesses." He moved past her to examine the nearest cask, running pale fingers along the oak with unexpected reverence. "Though I'll grant the setting is appropriate for an ambush by your enemies or a concerned visit from a king, depending on your perspective." Despite everything, Brielle felt her mouth twitch. "Which one are you?" "Still deciding." He glanced at her tablet. "Temperature monitoring at 2 in the morning. Either you're dedicated or you can't sleep." "Both." "Worried about tomorrow?" "Terrified about tomorrow. There's a difference." She set down the tablet. "Voltaire's complaint is going to derail everything. Even if the conclave votes in our favor eventually, the delay kills us. The cooperative families can't wait months for resolution. They'll have to take other contracts, and the model collapses." Tiberius turned to face her fully. In the cellar's close quarters, he seemed taller, more present, overwhelming in ways that had nothing to do with threat and everything to do with intensity. What if the complaint were withdrawn? It won't be. Voltaire's pride is at stake. Voltaire's pride was at stake when I threw him out of the hall. This is something else. He paused. Someone is funding his legal challenge. The complaint documents are too sophisticated for his house to have produced alone. He has backing. Brielle's stomach dropped. Who? Still investigating, but I have suspicions. His jaw tightened. There are lords who prefer the old ways, who see the accord as weakness and donor ethics as capitulation. They'd love nothing more than to see an ethical operation like yours fail spectacularly and publicly. To prove the old ways were better. Exactly. She leaned against a barrel, suddenly exhausted. So even if I survive Voltaire's complaint, there's a larger conspiracy waiting. That's comforting. I didn't come here to comfort you. Tiberius moved closer, close enough that she caught his scent, something like cold stone and winter pine. I came to ask what you need. To win the warrant fair. To prove we're the right choice on merit, not because the king intervened again. She met his eyes. You defending me at dinner was kind, but if you keep doing it, every achievement becomes suspect. They'll say I only succeeded because you favored me. And if I don't intervene, they'll dismantle you piece by piece until there's nothing left to favor. Then I guess we're both trapped. His expression shifted into something rueful and fond. You're not what I expected, Brielle Nolan. What did you expect? Someone harder, more calculating, the kind of person who could navigate vampire politics usually has to be. He reached out, and for a breathless moment she thought he'd touch her face. Instead, he lifted a strand of her dark hair, examining it in the dim light like it was precious metal. You're soft, genuine. You actually care about your donors as people, not assets. It's rare. Soft people don't survive this world, Your Majesty. Tiberius, and you're wrong. Soft people don't just survive. Sometimes they change the world entirely. He released her hair, stepped back. Tomorrow at the conclave, tell the truth. Present your model exactly as you've built it. Answer their questions with the same honesty you showed at dinner. Don't try to be what you think they want. And if that's not enough, then the conclave doesn't deserve you, and I'll find another way to ensure your family's survival. He said it like a vow. But I don't think it will come to that. You're stronger than you know. He left the way he'd come, silent as shadows, leaving Brielle alone in her cellar with a racing heart and the growing, dangerous certainty that she was falling for a king who'd forgotten how to trust. The conclave chambers were carved into the bedrock beneath the flooded quarry, a vast circular space ringed with stone benches and lit by electric sconces designed to mimic torchlight. Water sounds echoed from somewhere distant, the underground lake that filled the old mining pits pressing close against the walls. Brielle stood in the center circle, feeling 60 vampire lords watch her from their elevated seats. Tiberius sat highest, in a throne-like chair carved from the same stone as the walls, looking every inch the ancient king. He hadn't acknowledged her entrance beyond the briefest flicker of eye contact. Lord Iskander, serving as conclave moderator, stood to address the assembly. We convene to consider House Nolan's petition for the royal warrant. Before we begin, there is the matter of Lord Voltaire's formal complaint regarding procedural misconduct. Voltaire himself was absent, still banned from gatherings, but his proxy stood. The complaint stands. Lord Voltaire asserts that Miss Nolan staged his outburst through provocation and manipulated His Majesty's response to discredit a competitor. We request postponement pending full investigation. Lady Severine leaned forward. On what grounds? Lord Voltaire's insult was witnessed by everyone present. His words are not in dispute. His motivation is in dispute. Miss Nolan may have deliberately presented inferior vintage to elicit criticism, then used that criticism to play victim. Brielle's hands clenched at her sides. Inferior vintage. The 2024 reserve was flawless, and they all knew it. Tiberius spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the murmurs. If the vintage was inferior, why did Lord Voltaire accept a glass? Why did the rest of you finish yours? Silence. The complaint is theater. Dismiss it. Your Majesty, with respect, you're not an impartial voice in this matter, the proxy said carefully. Your defense of Miss Nolan is well documented and, some might say, inappropriate for a monarch presiding over competitive selection. Some might say many things. I'm not interested in their opinions. Tiberius's tone could have frozen summer, but in the interest of procedural fairness, I'll recuse myself from this specific complaint. Lord Iskander, call the vote. All in favor of dismissing Voltaire's complaint and proceeding with normal warrant consideration? The vote was 38 to 22. The complaint was dismissed. Brielle's knees nearly buckled with relief. She'd survived the first attack. Now came the hard part. For 3 hours she presented. Supply models, cooperative agreements, donor testimonials delivered via video by people who spoke about fair pay and respect and wanting to contribute to something meaningful. She walked the conclave through her family's history, her grandfather's vision, the slow build from 10 donors to 50. She outlined growth projections, addressed concerns about volume and consistency, and fielded questions that ranged from genuinely curious to openly hostile. Lady Severine was particularly sharp. Your model sounds ideal, Miss Nolan. Almost too ideal. How do we know your donors aren't simply performing for cameras? That behind the ethics presentation, you're not running the same coercion operations as everyone else? You could audit us, Brielle said evenly. Full access to our facilities, our records, our donors. Interview them without our supervision. I'll consent to any verification process the conclave requires. That caused a stir. Most houses guarded their operations jealously. Lord Iskander nodded slowly. That's a significant offer. It's the only offer that matters. You're trusting us with the court's supply. You should verify we're trustworthy. She looked up at Tiberius, found him watching her with an expression that made her pulse skip. Trust requires transparency. I'm willing to provide it. The session ended without a vote. These things took time, debate, political maneuvering. Brielle was dismissed to wait in one of the outer chambers while the conclave deliberated. She made it to the antechamber before her composure cracked, sank onto a stone bench, head in her hands, adrenaline finally crashing. She'd done everything right, said everything she'd practiced, and still had no idea if it was enough. You were extraordinary. She looked up. Tiberius stood in the doorway, backlit by the chamber's cold light. You're supposed to be deliberating, she said. I recused myself, remember? Which means I'm free to check on candidates in the outer chambers. He sat beside her, closer than protocol demanded. How are you holding up? Ask me after the vote. I'm asking now. Brielle studied him, this king who'd defended her twice and shown vulnerability in her cellar, and somehow made her feel seen in ways that had nothing to do with business. I'm terrified that I did my best and it still won't matter, that all the ethics and transparency and good intentions in the world can't compete with lords who have centuries of established power and no scruples about how they use it. The world's not that dark, isn't it? Your brother died from poison, and you haven't trusted anyone since. That's pretty dark, Your Majesty. Tiberius, he corrected automatically. Then, quieter. You're right. It is dark, but not uniformly. There are still people like your grandfather, like you, building something better in the gaps. He turned his hand palm up on the bench between them, an offering. Sometimes the darkness makes the light more precious. Brielle looked at his hand, pale and elegant and utterly still. An invitation he wouldn't force. Trust he wouldn't demand. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, cool and careful, and for a long moment they just sat there in the antechamber while the conclave argued behind closed doors and the future hung suspended. Whatever they decide, Tiberius said eventually, you change something here. Made them think about ethics and donor treatment in ways they've avoided for decades. That matters. But will it matter enough to save my family's business? I don't know, but I know I'll keep you safe regardless. She wanted to ask what that meant, how a king kept a common vintner safe, why he cared at all beyond political maneuvering. But before she could, the chamber doors opened. Lord Iskander appeared, expression unreadable. Miss Nolan, we require additional testimony. Please return to the circle. Tiberius squeezed her hand once before releasing it. Be brilliant, he murmured. Like you were before. She walked back into the chamber on unsteady legs. This time, the hostility was overt. A block of conservative lords, led by a severe woman named Lady Morgana, stood to address her. Miss Nolan, we've reviewed your materials. We have concerns about the long-term viability of an ethics-first model. Specifically, what happens when donor enthusiasm wanes, when you can't meet demand through voluntary contributions alone? That's not a hypothetical scenario we've faced, Brielle began. Not yet, but scale changes everything. The royal warrant requires supplying 5 estates, multiple courts, hundreds of vampires. Your 50 donors become a bottleneck. The cooperative model addresses that. 4 houses, 200 donors total, distributed sourcing. And if those houses decide they'd rather go independent, that the warrant should have been theirs? Lady Morgana smiled coldly. Your model relies on cooperation that might evaporate the moment it's convenient. It relies on contracts and shared ethics. The families I've partnered with believe in this approach. Belief is expensive, Miss Nolan. Can you afford it? The question landed like a blade, because the answer was no, not indefinitely, not if the warrant fell through and they were back to scraping by on merchant contracts and regional supply. But before Brielle could formulate a response, something else happened. A junior attendant entered the chamber at a run, protocol be damned, and went straight to Lord Iskander. Whispered urgently. Iskander's expression went from surprise to horror. What is it? Tiberius demanded from his throne. Your Majesty, there's been an incident. Elder Matthias of the Southern Court collapsed an hour ago. Severe poisoning. The source has been traced to a bottle bearing House Nolan's seal. The chamber erupted. Brielle's vision tunneled, sound fading to white noise. Poisoning. Her seal. Impossible. That's impossible, she said aloud, too loud. We don't supply the Southern Court. We don't have contracts outside the regional market. That bottle isn't ours. The seal was authenticated, Lady Morgana said, and her satisfaction was poorly hidden. House Nolan's mark, clear as day. Perhaps your ethics aren't as reliable as you claim. Or perhaps someone counterfeited our seal. Brielle's mind raced. Which is exactly the kind of sabotage I'd expect from someone who wanted us discredited. Convenient accusation. Logical accusation. Your Majesty, Elder Matthias needs to be examined by an independent specialist. The bottle needs full analysis, chain of custody verification. She was talking too fast, panic sharpening her voice. This is a setup. Someone's framing us. Tiberius was on his feet, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Everyone stops talking. Now. Silence fell like a hammer. Brielle is right. Counterfeiting is trivially easy for anyone with resources and motivation. The timing is suspect. We investigate before jumping to conclusions. With respect, Your Majesty, we can't ignore potential threat to court safety. Lord Iskander said. Until this is resolved, House Nolan's petition must be suspended. Fine. Suspend it, but no final vote until we have facts. Tiberius looked at Brielle, and his expression was complex, layered with concern and something that might have been apology. Miss Nolan, you'll need to surrender your cellar records and submit to examination. Standard protocol. Of course. Her voice sounded hollow in her own ears. Whatever you need. And you'll remain in the court complex. For your protection. That meant house arrest, however he phrased it. She was a suspect now, and suspects didn't get to leave. Brielle nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The conclave dissolved into chaos, lords arguing about procedure and safety and political implications. Through it all, Tiberius watched her with ancient eyes that had seen this play before, 4 centuries ago when his brother died and trust became impossible. She'd asked him to trust her. Now someone had made sure he couldn't. The rooms they gave her were luxurious as prisons went. High ceilings, antique furniture, a window overlooking the flooded quarry where moonlight turned water to mercury. Brielle stood at that window for an hour, watching nothing, trying to think. The knock came eventually. She knew who it would be before she opened the door. Tiberius looked tired, which shouldn't have been possible for someone immortal. "May I come in?" She stepped aside. He entered, moving to the center of the room before turning to face her. "I know you didn't do it," he said without preamble. "Do you?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Because I'm a suspect now, in a poisoning case, just like your brother's cupbearer." His jaw tightened. "Nothing like my brother's cupbearer." "No? Someone you trusted, someone close to the court supply, someone whose bottles made it past security and killed." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Sounds pretty similar to me." "You're not him. You can't know that. You said it yourself. You can't taste treachery anymore. Can't trust your own judgment about who's safe and who's not." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I could be exactly what Lady Morgana thinks I am. An opportunist who saw a chance at the warrant and took it. Ethics be damned." Tiberius crossed the space between them in 3 strides, caught her shoulders. "Stop. Stop saying that." "Why? You're thinking it." "I'm not thinking it. I'm thinking that someone went to considerable trouble to forge your seal and plant evidence and time it for maximum damage. I'm thinking that level of sophistication requires resources and inside knowledge. I'm thinking this is exactly the kind of play a rival lord would make to eliminate competition." His hands tightened, not painful, but firm, grounding. "I'm thinking that if you were actually guilty, you wouldn't have offered complete transparency at the conclave. Counterfeiters don't volunteer for audits." Brielle stared up at him, at the conviction in those amber eyes. "You really believe that?" "I really believe you, which is terrifying in its own way, because I haven't let myself believe anyone in 400 years. He released her shoulders but didn't step back. "The last time I trusted, my brother died, so yes, this is hard for me, but I'm choosing it anyway, because you're worth the risk." Something in her chest cracked open. "Tiberius, let me help you. Let me trace the counterfeiting ring. Find who did this. Clear your name. Say yes. And if I say yes, if I let you help, every other house will claim favoritism. Will say I manipulated the king into protecting me. Let them say it. I don't care. You should care. You're the king. Your reputation matters for more than just me." His laugh was low and a little bitter. "My reputation survived throwing a lord out of my hall in front of witnesses. It'll survive this, too." He lifted one hand, hesitated, then brushed his knuckles along her jaw with devastating gentleness. "Besides, you're not just anyone. Not anymore." Her breath caught. "What am I?" Still deciding, but something important. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Something worth protecting. They stood like that, close enough to share breath, while the moonlight painted silver lines across the floor and the quarry water whispered against stone far below. Brielle should have stepped back, maintained distance, remembered protocol and politics, and the 1,000 reasons a human vintner couldn't let herself fall for a vampire king. She leaned into his touch instead. Tiberius made a soft sound, satisfaction or relief, and pulled her properly into his arms. She went, burying her face against his chest, feeling the absence of heartbeat and the cool strength of him and the way his hand curved protectively around the back of her head. "We'll fix this," he murmured into her hair. "I promise." She wanted to believe him, chose to believe him, at least for tonight, while the world narrowed to this room and this moment and the impossible safety of being held by someone who'd forgotten how to hold anyone. Morning brought grim news. Elder Matthias was stable but weak, the poison identified as a sophisticated silver compound similar to the one that had killed the king's brother. The bottle's seal had been forensically analyzed and confirmed as an exact match to House Nolan's registered mark. Someone had either stolen their original seal or recreated it with remarkable precision. Brielle's family cellars had been searched, their records seized, their donors interviewed. Garrett called with barely contained rage to report that investigators had torn apart 40 years of careful organization looking for evidence of conspiracy. "They questioned everyone," he said, voice tight. "Treated our people like criminals. Some of the donors are talking about withdrawing consent because they don't want to be associated with a poisoning investigation." Brielle closed her eyes. The donor pool was fragile, built on trust that could evaporate overnight. "How many?" "6 so far. But more are nervous. If this drags out—" He didn't finish. Didn't have to. "I'll fix it," she said. "Somehow." "How?" "You're under house arrest and half the conclave thinks you're guilty." "I have help." "The king." Garrett's tone shifted. "Brielle, be careful. I know he's been kind to you, but he's still a vampire lord with his own agenda. Don't mistake political maneuvering for personal interest." Too late for that, she thought. "I know what I'm doing." She hoped it was true. Tiberius appeared mid-morning with a tablet and 3 file boxes. "I've been investigating. And the bottle that poisoned Elder Matthias was purchased 2 months ago through a gray market dealer who operates in the borderlands. Cash transaction, no digital trail, no witnesses willing to talk. The dealer's gone to ground. So we're nowhere. Not nowhere. The dealer has a reputation for handling high-end forgeries, particularly for clients who want to discredit competitors. He's worked with several noble houses in the past." Tiberius set down the boxes. "These are his transaction records, obtained through less than legal means. We're looking for a pattern." They spent hours combing through records, cross-referencing dates and purchases and known enemies. Brielle's eyes burned from screen fatigue by the time she found it. "Here," she said, pointing. 3 months ago. Large order for vintage bottles, specifically Northern regional style, followed by a seal commission from a metalworker known for reproduction work." Tiberius leaned over her shoulder to read. "The buyer used a numbered account. We'll need to trace it through financial networks." He was very close, his breath cold against her ear. "This is good work, Brielle." "I'm motivated." "I noticed." He didn't move away. "There's something else. Elder Matthias regained consciousness an hour ago. He's willing to testify about the bottle's origin. That could clear us. It could, if his testimony is credible. He's been known to accept bribes in the past." Tiberius straightened reluctantly. "I'm having him brought here for formal questioning. You should be present." "Will the conclave allow that?" "I'm not asking the conclave." Elder Matthias looked every one of his 600 years, propped against pillows in the complex's medical wing. His skin was grayer than vampire pale should be, his white hair limp against the pillow, but his eyes were sharp when Brielle and Tiberius entered. "Your Majesty," he rasped, "come to finish what the poison started?" "Don't be dramatic, Matthias. I need information, not theater." Tiberius pulled a chair close to the bed. "The bottle that poisoned you. Where did you get it?" "Gift. Delivered to my estate 3 days ago with a card saying it was from House Nolan's new reserve collection." Brielle stepped forward. "We didn't send you anything. We don't have your estate on our distribution list." "So I discovered." He coughed, painful and wet. "The card was forged too. I should have been more careful, but it seemed legitimate. House Nolan's reputation is good. I thought it was a marketing sample. Who would want you poisoned specifically? Tiberius asked. Matthias laughed bitterly. Take your pick. I've made enemies for centuries, but the timing suggests someone who wanted to accomplish two things at once: hurt me and discredit House Nolan's warrant petition, which narrows the list considerably. To lords who opposed both me and the ethics model, yes. Matthias looked at Brielle. You're caught in someone else's old grudge, Miss Nolan. I apologize. Can you testify to this? Officially? I can. I will. He shifted against the pillows. I'm old, but I'm not senile. I know a setup when I survive one. They had their witness. Now they needed the architect. The financial trace took another full day, tracking the numbered account through 3 banks and 2 offshore holdings before finally connecting to a name. When it resolved, Tiberius went perfectly still. What? Brielle asked. Who is it? Lady Morgana. His voice was flat. Senior member of the conservative bloc. Elder Matthias testified against her in a corruption case 50 years ago. She's held the grudge since. And she opposed our ethics model from the start. 2 birds, 1 poisoned bottle. He set down the tablet. We have her. Do we? Can we prove she commissioned the forgery? The paper trail connects her holding company to the dealer's numbered account. It's circumstantial, but combined with Matthias's testimony and the timing, it's enough to bring formal charges. Brielle felt the first real hope in days. So we take it to the conclave. We do, tonight. Tiberius looked at her. Are you ready for this? It's going to be vicious. Morgana won't go quietly. I've been ready since Voltaire called me common. She straightened her shoulders. Let's finish this. The emergency conclave session was called for midnight, all lords required to attend. Brielle walked into the chamber beside Tiberius, very aware of the statement that made the king and the accused entering together. Let them interpret it however they wanted. Lady Morgana sat in her elevated seat, composed and cold. When Tiberius outlined the evidence, her expression never flickered. These are serious accusations, Your Majesty, she said when he finished. Based on circumstantial financial records and the testimony of an elder known for making false claims when it serves him. Elder Matthias nearly died, Brielle said. Why would he lie about that? Why would I poison him? We've had our disagreements, but attempted murder is excessive even for me. Unless you were trying to accomplish 2 goals. Tiberius stepped forward. Discredit House Nolan's petition and eliminate an old enemy. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Timing proves nothing. I could argue you manufactured this evidence to protect your favorite candidate. You could, but the financial records are independently verifiable, and the dealer is now in custody willing to testify in exchange for leniency. Would you like to hear what he has to say about your commission? For the first time, Morgana's composure cracked, just slightly, a tightness around her eyes. The dealer is a known criminal. His testimony is worthless. His testimony is corroborated by paper trails, witness accounts, and forensic analysis of the forged seal. You're out of exits, Morgana. Tiberius's voice could have cut stone. The question is whether you confess now or force us to drag every detail out publicly. The chamber held its breath. Lady Morgana stood slowly. This is a witch hunt. The king has decided he wants House Nolan to win the warrant, and he's using me as a convenient scapegoat to ensure it happens. None of this evidence would exist if he weren't desperately trying to protect his pet project. Careful, Tiberius said softly. Why? What will you do? Throw me out of the hall like Voltaire? Exile me for having the audacity to question your judgment? She looked around the chamber. He's forgotten what it means to be objective. Forgotten that kings don't involve themselves in warrant competitions or take sides or defend candidates personally. He's compromised, and we're all pretending not to notice. I notice you're not actually denying the charges, Lord Iskander said. Morgana's smile was thin. I deny them categorically, but I also recognize when I've lost. The king has decided, and the rest of you will fall in line because that's what we do. We pretend his obvious bias doesn't exist and vote however he wants. The evidence exists independent of my preference, Tiberius said. Does it? Or did you make sure it would surface once you decided Miss Nolan was worth protecting? Brielle couldn't stay silent anymore. I didn't ask for his protection. I didn't want it because of exactly this, people assuming I can't succeed on my own merit. But the truth is, I don't need protection from legitimate competition. I need protection from people like you who poison elders and forge seals and sabotage ethical operations because you can't stand the idea that the old ways are dying. The old ways kept us alive for millennia. The old ways made us predators and tyrants, Tiberius cut in. The Accord changed that. Miss Nolan represents the future of that change. And yes, I support her. Not because I'm biased, but because she's right and you're wrong. And I'm tired of watching lords like you fight progress at every turn. The chamber erupted in arguments, accusations, procedural debates. Through it all, Morgana stood silent, calculating. Finally, she spoke. Fine. You want a confession? I commissioned the forgery. I arranged for the poisoned bottle to reach Matthias. I timed it to destroy House Nolan's petition. She looked at Brielle. Your ethics model is dangerous. It gives humans too much power, too much voice. Eventually, they'll decide they don't need to cooperate with us at all. Better to stop it now. By killing people. Brielle couldn't believe what she was hearing. By proving the model's inherent vulnerability, which I did. Your seal was stolen and replicated. Your reputation was damaged. Your donor pool is withdrawing consent as we speak. I may have failed to stop your warrant, but I've crippled your operation regardless. Tiberius moved so fast Brielle barely saw it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Morgana by the throat, lifted off her feet against the stone wall. You're done, he said, voice utterly empty of inflection. Done in this conclave, done in court, done in any territory that recognizes my authority. You'll retire to your estates and stay there until I decide you're no longer a threat. Understood? Morgana clawed at his hand, gasping. Managed a nod. He dropped her. She collapsed, coughing. 2 guards appeared to escort her out. The chamber was silent until the doors closed behind her. Then Lord Iskander cleared his throat. Well, that was dramatic. Shall we proceed to the warrant vote? Motion to clear House Nolan of all charges related to the poisoning, someone called. Seconded. The vote was unanimous. Motion to grant House Nolan the royal warrant for primary blood supply to the court. Seconded. This vote took longer, whispered consultations and political calculations. But when Lord Iskander called for hands, the result was 41 in favor, 19 opposed. They'd won. Brielle's knees went weak. Tiberius caught her elbow, steadying her with a touch that lingered. Congratulations, Miss Nolan, Lord Iskander said formally. The warrant is yours, pending final contract negotiations. You may return to your operations and begin preparations for supply. She managed to thank him, managed to nod at the other lords, managed to walk out of the chamber with some semblance of dignity. But the moment the doors closed behind them, she turned to Tiberius. We did it. You did it. I just removed obstacles. You believed me when no one else did. His expression softened. I told you, you're worth the risk. He glanced down the corridor. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. She followed him through winding passages, deeper into the complex, until they reached a door she recognized. The entrance to the private cellars, where the court's own reserves were kept. Why are we here? She asked. Tiberius unlocked the door, led her inside. The space was similar to her own cellars, but vaster, barrel upon barrel stretching into darkness. He walked to a specific section, selected a bottle from a locked cabinet. This is from the year my brother died, he said quietly. The last vintage I allowed myself to enjoy before the poisoning. I sealed the rest of the collection and haven't touched it since. Brielle understood immediately. Tiberius. 400 years I've been afraid to let anyone serve me, afraid to trust even the most basic gesture of hospitality. He opened the bottle with practiced ease, poured 2 glasses, held one out to her. I can't taste what you taste, can't verify safety the way I used to. But I can choose to believe you anyway. You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not proving anything, I'm choosing. He lifted his glass. To new ways, and the people brave enough to build them. Brielle raised her own glass, throat tight with emotion. They drank together, the vintage sliding smooth and complex across her tongue, perfect even after 4 centuries of aging. Tiberius set down his glass, and his hand was steady. No fear, no hesitation, just choice, freely made. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For trusting me, for seeing me, for defending me even when it complicated your politics." "You're not a complication, Brielle Nolan. You're the best thing to happen to this court in 400 years. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "And I think I'm falling in love with you, which is inconvenient and terrifying and probably breaks a dozen protocols. But I'm telling you anyway because life's too short to waste on pretending." Her heart stopped, started again, racing. "Life's not short for you." "No, but meaningful moments are rare regardless of lifespan." His hand came up to cup her face. "Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you feel it too." She could have been diplomatic, could have cited all the reasons a human vintner and a vampire king made no sense, could have protected herself from the inevitable heartbreak of loving someone immortal. She kissed him instead. He went still for half a breath, surprised. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close as he kissed back with 400 years of loneliness and hope and desperate, careful yearning. His mouth was cool and sure and devastating, taking her apart and rebuilding her with every touch. When they finally broke apart, Brielle was shaking. "Is that a yes?" Tiberius murmured against her temple. "That's a, I've been falling for you since you threw Voltaire out of the hall, and I'm terrified and exhilarated and so far gone I can't see straight." His laugh was low and delighted. "Good. That makes 2 of us." They stayed in the cellar for hours, talking and kissing and planning a future that seemed impossible but was maybe, just maybe, within reach. When Brielle finally returned to her rooms, dawn was breaking over the flooded quarry, turning water to gold. She had work to do, a warrant to fulfill, a cooperative to build, donors to reassure. But for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. 3 weeks later, the contract was signed and supply began. Brielle's family cellars hummed with renewed activity, donors returning as news of their exoneration and warrant win spread. The cooperative houses integrated smoothly, their combined operation exceeding even optimistic projections. Tiberius visited often, always with an excuse about quality verification or supply concerns, always staying longer than necessary. They talked about everything and nothing, argued about barrel aging and donor recruitment, kissed in the shadows between casks where no one could see. "This is dangerous," Brielle said one night, wrapped in his arms with her back against an oak barrel. "If the conclave finds out we're involved, they'll say it invalidates the warrant. Let them try." His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "The warrant was earned fairly. What we do after is nobody's business but ours. You're the king. Everything you do is everybody's business. Then they'll have to adjust their expectations." He tipped her chin up, kissed her slowly. "I'm not hiding you, Brielle. I'm not pretending this doesn't exist. I've spent 4 centuries being careful and isolated and safe. I'm done. You say that now. But there will be pressure, political complications, lords who think a human isn't appropriate company for vampire royalty. And I'll ignore them the same way I ignored them when they said donor ethics were impossible." His expression turned serious. "Unless you don't want this, unless I'm pushing too hard, too fast, tell me if I am." "You're not." She touched his face, marveling at the impossible reality of being here, being his. "I want this. I want you. I'm just afraid of what it costs." "It costs nothing we're not willing to pay." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Trust me." She did. Against all logic and self-preservation, she trusted him completely. 2 months after the warrant was granted, Tiberius made their relationship public. not with an announcement or formal declaration, but by bringing Brielle to the winter court, gathering as his personal guest, seating her at the high table beside his own throne, introducing her as his companion to every lord and lady present. The gossip was immediate and vicious, but Tiberius ignored it with regal indifference, and Brielle followed his lead. They danced together at the midwinter ball, his hand at her waist, her head on his shoulder, while the court watched and whispered, and slowly, gradually, accepted. Lady Severine approached them during a break between dances. "You two are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Both," Brielle said. "Definitely both." "Well, for what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been dead inside since his brother's murder. It's nice to see him alive again." She nodded to Tiberius. "Don't mess this up, Your Majesty." "I'll try not to." After Severine left, Brielle leaned into Tiberius. "She called you dead inside." "I was. For a very long time." He turned her to face him properly. "You changed that. I brought you wine and argued about oak barrels. That's not exactly resurrection. You brought me trust and reminded me why it matters. You showed me that the world isn't uniformly dark, that there are still people building things worth protecting." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "That's everything, Brielle." She kissed him there in the middle of the ballroom, in front of the entire court, and felt his smile against her mouth. Spring brought the Harvest Festival, an annual celebration where donors and vintners gathered to mark the year's first draws. It was held on the terraces above the flooded quarry, where gardens cascaded down stone walls and water reflected sky in impossible blues. Brielle moved through the crowd, greeting donors and cooperative partners, accepting congratulations on the warrant's success. The past 6 months had been intense, scaling up production while maintaining ethics, but they'd done it. Every bottle that left their cellars met the standards her grandfather had established, and the court was satisfied. She found Tiberius in one of the quieter gardens, surrounded by 3 young vampires who were listening with rapt attention to something he was explaining about blood law. When he saw her, his whole face lit up. "Excuse me," he told his audience. "Duty calls." He met her halfway, caught her hands. "You look happy." "I am happy. Today's perfect. Almost perfect." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small box. "This makes it perfect." Brielle's breath caught. "Tiberius, what?" "Open it." Inside was a ring, silver and delicate, set with a single dark ruby. She stared at it, then at him. "I know we've only been together 6 months, Tiberius said. "And I know there are complications with human lifespans and vampire immortality, and we should probably discuss all of that before making any permanent decisions. But I also know I love you, and I know I want whatever time we have together to be official and recognized and real." He took the ring from the box, held it ready. "Brielle Nolan, will you marry me?" She should have thought about it, weighed the implications, considered the political fallout. Should have been practical and careful and smart. She said yes immediately. He slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her hard enough to lift her off her feet. Around them, the festival continued, but for a moment it was just the two of them, vampire king and human vintner, building something new in the spaces between old wounds. When they finally broke apart, Brielle was crying. "The lifespan thing, we should talk about it." "We should," Tiberius agreed. "There are options. Turning if you want it. Extended aging treatments if you don't. We'll figure it out together." "You'd really turn me? Even though it changes everything about who I am?" "I'd give you the choice. Which is different?" His hand cupped her face. "I want you to stay, Brielle. I want decades, centuries if you'll have them. But I won't force transformation just because I'm afraid of losing you. We'll find a way that works for both of us." "What if I want it? The turning?" His expression shifted, hope and hunger and careful control. "Then we do it right, at your pace, with full knowledge of what you're gaining and losing. No pressure, no urgency, just choice." She leaned into him. "I love you." "I love you too. More than I thought I could love anything, after all this time. They stood there until the sun set and the festival lights came on, turning the terraces into something magical. Then Tiberius led her down to the water's edge, where they could see the reflected stars and the future spreading out before them like an unwritten vintage. Months turned into a year. The wedding was planned for the autumn equinox, a merging of human tradition and vampire ceremony that would bind them officially before both their worlds. Brielle spent her days managing the flourishing warrant operation and her nights with Tiberius, learning vampire politics and court history and the 1,000 small ways to love someone who'd forgotten they deserved it. They talked about the turning often, working through implications and logistics. Brielle wanted it, wanted the time it would give them, but she also wanted to do it right. She spent hours with vampire educators, learning what transformation meant physically and mentally, preparing herself for the change. "You're sure?" Tiberius asked the night before the wedding. They were in his private chambers overlooking the quarry. "No doubts? No hesitations?" "No doubts. I want this life with you, all of it. Human lifespan isn't enough time. We could wait until after the wedding, give you more time to be certain. I'm certain now, but after the wedding works too. It gives us the honeymoon first." His smile was soft, practical even in romance. "Someone has to be. You're hopeless." He pulled her into his lap, kissed her temple. "Hopelessly in love, maybe." "Terrible line, Your Majesty." "I'm old. I'm allowed terrible lines." She laughed and kissed him properly, tasting the future on his lips. The wedding was everything they'd hoped. Held in the hall where they'd first met, where Tiberius had thrown Voltaire out defending her honor, where everything had started. Vampire lords and human donors mingled, celebrating the impossible match that somehow made perfect sense. Garrett walked Brielle down the aisle, tears in his eyes. Iris and Colin stood as witnesses, beaming. The cooperative house leaders attended in their formal best, proud of the empire they'd built together. Tiberius waited at the altar in midnight blue silk, white hair braided with silver thread, looking every inch the ancient king except for the expression on his face when he saw her. That was pure wonder, human and vulnerable and achingly young. The ceremony was bilingual, vows spoken in English and the old vampire tongue. When Tiberius promised to cherish and protect her for as long as they both should live, his voice cracked. When Brielle promised the same, she meant every word. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like forever. The reception lasted until dawn. Somewhere around midnight, Tiberius pulled her onto the balcony overlooking the flooded quarry. "Happy?" he asked. Deliriously. "You? Haven't been this happy in 400 years, maybe ever." He spun her in a slow circle under the stars. "We did it. Built something good out of old trauma and new trust. We did, and we'll keep building. For centuries," he agreed. "If you're still willing." "I'm willing. Tomorrow, after we get back from the honeymoon, I want to start the turning process." His hands tightened on her waist. "You're sure? We don't have to rush." "I'm not rushing. I'm choosing." She smiled up at him. "Someone once told me that choosing trust is the bravest thing we can do. I'm choosing you, all of you, for as long as time allows." He kissed her there under the stars, and it tasted like promises kept. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in the Italian countryside, a villa overlooking vineyards that reminded Brielle of home. They talked about everything and nothing, made love under ancient frescoes, tasted wines that were older than most nations. Tiberius showed her the Europe of his youth, the places that had shaped him before tragedy made him careful. She fell in love with him all over again, this version who laughed freely and relaxed into joy. When they returned, she was ready. The turning was done in stages, Tiberius walking her through each step with infinite patience. The first bite to establish the bond, gentle and careful, his venom beginning the slow transformation. The fever that followed, her body rebuilding itself cell by cell. The moment she woke with vampire senses, the world impossibly vivid and strange. Tiberius was there through all of it, holding her through the painful parts, celebrating the triumphs. When her eyes finally cleared with the amber glow of successful transformation, he was the first thing she saw clearly. "How do you feel?" he asked. Brielle considered. Her body felt strong, her senses overwhelming, her mind sharp in ways that were alien and exhilarating. Different. Good different. Like I'm finally fully here. The bloodlust will be strong at first. We'll work through it together. Together. I like that word. He helped her sit up, steadied her when the room spun. Want to try something? Depends what it is. He produced a bottle from the bedside table. Her own reserve vintage, the 2024 that had started everything. Poured 2 glasses, handed her one. You've never tasted your own work from this side, he said. Seems like the right moment. Brielle lifted the glass, inhaled. The scent was completely different now, layers she'd never detected blooming across her enhanced senses. She sipped carefully. The flavor exploded across her tongue, complex and rich and absolutely perfect. She could taste everything. The donor's health, the barrel's oak, the fermentation's precise timing, the mineral notes from northern water. It was her work, her vision, experienced in ways she'd never imagined. Oh, she breathed. Oh, that's what you've been tasting all along. Tiberius smiled. Now you know why I couldn't stop drinking it at the long table. This is incredible. I can feel the care we put into it, every decision, every choice. It's all there in the vintage. That's your gift. You always could make blood feel like art. He clinked his glass against hers. To new perspectives, and the woman who gave me mine back. They drank together, vampire king and newly turned queen, while the sun set beyond the windows and their future unfolded in shades of eternity. 2 years later, Brielle stood in the cellars directing the autumn harvest, her voice carrying authority that came from experience and transformation both. The warrant operation had expanded to 7 cooperative houses now, employing over 300 donors and producing enough volume to supply multiple courts. Colin had taken over much of the day-to-day management, freeing Brielle to focus on quality control and new initiatives. They'd started a training program for aspiring vintners, teaching ethics-first techniques to the next generation. The model was spreading, slowly changing the industry from within. Garrett and Iris had retired to advisory roles, spending their days consulting and their evenings at the vineyard they'd always dreamed of buying. They looked happy, fulfilled, proud of what their family had built. Tiberius appeared in the cellar doorway, backlit by afternoon sun that no longer threatened him thanks to modern UV treatments. Lord Iskander wants to discuss expanding the warrant to include the Western Territories. Are you interested? Brielle looked up from her notes. Even after 2 years of marriage and transformation, seeing him still made her breath catch. Depends on the terms. We'd need at least 3 more houses to meet that volume. I thought you'd say that. I already have a list of candidates. Of course you do. She crossed to him, rose on tiptoe to kiss him. You're very efficient, Your Majesty. I have good motivation. His arms came around her waist. Though I was hoping we could discuss something else first. Oh? I've been thinking about what you said last month, about wanting to start a family eventually. Brielle's heart skipped. They'd talked about it in abstract terms, the possibility of children once the warrant operation was fully stable, but she hadn't realized he was serious about timing. And I think we're ready, if you are. His expression was cautiously hopeful. The operation runs smoothly. We have support systems in place. Our relationship is solid. Why wait? No reason except fear, she admitted. I've never been a mother. Don't know if I'll be any good at it. You were never a vampire vintner either, and look how that turned out. He kissed her forehead. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. She leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. Okay, let's do it. Let's start a family. His joy was incandescent. Really? Really? On one condition. Name it. If it's a boy, we name him Emrys, after your brother. Tiberius went very still. Brielle. You loved him. His death shaped 400 years of your life. If we're building something new, we should honor what came before. She looked up at him. Unless that's too painful. No, it's. His voice cracked. It's perfect. Thank you. They held each other in the cellar's cool shadows, surrounded by bottles that told stories of trust rebuilt and futures claimed. Outside, the harvest continued, donors laughing as they contributed to something meaningful. Above them, the court prepared for the evening's gatherings, vampire and human working in cooperation. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built, was thriving. 18 months later, Brielle gave birth to a son with dark hair and his father's amber eyes. They named him Draconis, and Tiberius cried when he held him for the first time, 400 years of grief finally finding its resolution in new life. The court celebrated for 3 days. Garrett and Iris moved back temporarily to help with the baby, delighted to be grandparents. Colin became the favorite uncle, teaching Emrys nonsense songs and spoiling him outrageously. Brielle adjusted to motherhood the same way she'd adjusted to everything else, with determination, love, and Tiberius at her side. They took turns with midnight feedings, argued about parenting philosophies, and slowly figured out how to be a family. 3 years after Emrys, they had another son. They named him Julian, and he was quieter than his brother, thoughtful where Emrys was bold. The boys grew up in the court complex, educated by vampire tutors and human teachers, learning to navigate both worlds with the ease of children who'd never known anything different. The warrant operation continued to expand. By the time Emrys was 10, they were supplying 8 territories and employing over 500 donors. The ethical model had become industry standard. Brielle's grandfather's vision finally realized on a scale he'd never imagined. Brielle stood on the quarry terraces during the harvest festival, watching her sons race through the gardens with other vampire and human children. Tiberius appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked, like he still needed to confirm it. "Beyond words. You? I have you, our sons, a kingdom at peace, and a legacy that will outlast us all. I'm more than happy, Brielle. I'm content, which is something I never thought I'd feel again." She leaned into him, watching sunset paint the water in shades of gold. 20 years since the long table dinner where everything changed. 20 years of building trust and love and a future that honored the past while refusing to be bound by it. "What would your brother think?" she asked quietly. "About all this?" Tiberius was silent for a long moment. "I think he'd be proud. Of the accord, of the changes we've made, of the family we've built. He always believed in doing things right, even when it was hard." His hand tightened on her waist. "He would have liked you. Probably would have fallen in love with you himself if he'd met you first. Lucky for me, he didn't. Lucky for me, you're terrible at staying out of vampire politics." She laughed. "I never intended to be here, you know. I just wanted to save my family's business, win the warrant, go home. And instead you transformed an industry, married a king, and changed the course of vampire-human relations. Terrible at small ambitions, apparently. Clearly your influence. Clearly." He turned her to face him, smiling that smile that still made her heart race even after 2 decades. "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me when I'd forgotten how to be trustworthy. For choosing me when it would have been easier not to. For building this life with me when I'd given up on having any life at all." He kissed her softly. "For being exactly who you are, Brielle Nolan Draconis, common vintner who became a queen. I'm not a queen. You are to me, and to everyone who knows what you've accomplished." She kissed him back, there on the terraces where they'd gotten engaged, where their story had shifted from maybe to forever. Below them, the festival continued. Their son's laughter rang out clear and joyful. The future they'd built together spread out in every direction, full of possibility and promise. 20 years ago, a rival lord had called her common at dinner. A vampire king had thrown him out of the hall in her defense. And from that moment, everything had changed. Not because of the king's intervention, Brielle realized now, but because she'd refused to let someone else's cruelty define her worth. Because she'd stood up for her values even when it was terrifying. Because she'd chosen to trust when trust was hardest. The rest had followed naturally. Love and transformation, family and empire, a legacy that would outlast them both. Tiberius was right. She wasn't common. She never had been. She was exactly who she needed to be. Exactly when the world needed her most. And that, Brielle thought as she watched the sun set over water that reflected their future in shades of gold, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.